Okay, welcome to Chapter 33 in the Practices book. So this is on server upgrades, page 587. So there's two major approaches to do a server upgrade. You can upgrade in place, basically, maybe pop it open, pull more RAM in, upgrade the operating system, that kind of stuff. Or build an entire new machine and migrate the users over to the new machine. So you're going to need a checklist. And by the way, the authors of the book have a bizarre sense of humor. You got to read that little section where they talked about, well, the publisher of the book graciously accepted to put, blank pages at the back of the book, and you could use that for scrap paper to put your checklist together. And if you run out of scrap paper, just go buy another book. I think that's hilariously funny. Okay, the upgrade process on page 587. So basically what we're talking about is this list, and we're going to talk about this for the rest of this little section here. So the first one is develop a service checklist. So what services are provided by each host? Man, you better have a configuration database. Somebody needs to know, where is the DNS server? Where is the DHCP server? Where is the email server? Where is the web server? And then who are the customers for each one of those things? And what software packages? I mean, you got to know this. And first of all, who knows the answers to these questions? It's probably going to be your own staff, your own system administration staff. They're the ones that know, oh, well, we migrated the web server to this machine, last year, so the web server's over here. No one else is going to know, right? Okay, just saying. And then dependency check. We need to find out what services are required. So, for example, let's say, well, I'm going to shut down the SQL server, during this upgrade, who uses the SQL server? Man, you better know. I mean, if it's the sales department, they're going to be highly upset, right? That kind of stuff. So you need to know. And what happens if you find some sort of a service or a database that nobody is using at all? Do you go ahead and take the plunge and go, hey, let's disable it? I probably would, but probably would not do it at the same time as an upgrade. I would come back later and say, once I got the upgrade going and everybody's happy and I'm confident with it, I might go back then a week later and go, I don't think anyone's using. Let's just turn it off, see what happens. Well, nobody screamed. That kind of stuff. Okay, if you have a lack of inventory, if you do, then you probably have spreadsheets or something, or maybe some change log or something that would help. But man, you really, really, really need a database, big time. So one of the things you ought to do in this service checklist is verify your assumptions. Well, I think it's going to take this long, and I think with this, and I think that. Have other people come around and go, well, when we did this in my other company, before I started working here, it took twice as long as what you're thinking. And you're going, oh, okay, that kind of stuff. And that customer dependency check, that shaded area on page 590, one of the discussions was, so what happens if you turn this thing off? And everybody goes, well, wait a minute, doesn't the sales department need that? That kind of discussion. It has to be, because up to that point, everyone was agreeing, yep, we can do this, you can do this, and until someone said, well, wait a minute, what services does that thing use? And they went, oh yeah, if we turn that off, dang, that's going to affect a lot of things. So yeah, you have to have that discussion. Compatibility, number 2 on page 591. Does the existing software run on the new server? Let's say I'm going from an ancient Windows Server 2012 to 2022. And is it going to work? Do you know? Can you tell? Do I need to upgrade the software? I really don't like upgrading too many things at once. I don't like upgrading the server and upgrading SQL. I'm using SQL Server as an example. I don't want to upgrade that at the same time. Okay, one at a time, guys. Small batch. Remember small batch? Okay, so don't be on the bleeding edge. Don't go out and say, hey, well, the new version's out. Let's go ahead and go to the new version. Wait till everyone else has tried it and come up with, oh, well, we had some problems with this. And don't just believe the vendor. If the vendor says, oh, yeah, I don't think you should have any trouble at all using that old piece of software on the new server. Yeah, I think you'd be in good shape. Maybe you ought to test this. Okay. So one choice is upgrade the software before you do the operating system upgrade. That would kind of make sense. Do it as a separate project. Don't try to do them at the same time. If the test fails, then darn well that the problem is with the software, not with the server upgrade. So again, I don't want to be chasing phantoms here where I think the problem is X and it's not, it's something else. After the operating system upgrade, so I'll do the operating system first, and then a week later I come in and go, okay, it's time for us to do this. Now, you're not in a particularly time constraint now, particularly if you're doing the migration model. You know, I have the new server up and running and no one's actually using it yet. And then I upgrade the software and again, nobody's using it yet. So I can take my time. I can do other things. Obviously, you may not be able to do that. You may not be able to separate the two. And then, postpone. Like wait until the vendor can absolutely tell you, yes, we have tried it and everything's okay. Don't be bleeding edge. Wait for somebody. Hopefully the vendor's going to tell you the truth. Verification. Step number 3 on page 592. So you need some sort of a pass, fail script that runs that says, okay, we're done. This works, this works, this works, this works, this works. Some sort of a script. And you probably ought to run the script first before you do the upgrade. Obviously, everything will pass, right? It'll go, you'll get 15 things in your script and all 15 of them come up and say pass, 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 pass. Okay, and then after the upgrade, you run the script a second time and it comes pass, 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 pass. And you go, okay. So let's talk about regression testing. So regression testing is about testing the output before and testing the output after and making sure that nothing has changed. Or if there were changes, there were things you were expecting to see. That works really nice if you have like a console application that generates a file. The other term, the same term could be used to mean something else, and that is an old problem that you previously have fixed has reappeared, a regression bug. In other words, I fixed it in version 4, but when I went and applied this thing, that bug came back with a vengeance. I have to go fix it a second time. So sometimes your testing is a little bit more complicated. Okay. Again, if it's a console app, it's pretty easy. If it's a GUI app, testing is going to be tough. Testing network things, can I connect? Can I do this? Those are kind of sort of simple. One more time, test-driven development, shaded area on page 594. All changes require tests, and tests are written first. You don't write the script for the change and then write the test. Your mind is going to be focusing on making sure that this thing's work. That's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to write the test first. This is what it has to do. Here's all the feature it has to have. And then you write the change. If you do it in the wrong order, your mind is going to be writing tests that you know darn well are going to work. That's not the way it should work. Okay, number 4. Choose an upgrade strategy. An in-place upgrade. Basically, do a complete, backup of the entire system, like for a fallback. Do the upgrade, test it, see if it works, release. Woohoo! Migration. Now, migration is pretty cool. That basically means new hardware. I can set up a new server, perhaps with more RAM, more CPU, right? That kind of stuff. I install, not upgrade. I do an install on the new server, the new operating system on the new server. I test it and then release it, and now I've got time. In fact, considering small batch, I don't have to move everybody over. Well, depending on what kind of system it is. Maybe I don't have to move everybody over at once. I could just grab this group and move them over to the new server, and okay, that worked. Next week I'll move this group over to the server if you have a system that allows that. And so the small batch principle very much applies here. So in place is probably faster and easier. You just have an outage and you upgrade the operating system and you're done. Okay, it's kind of quick. Migration allows for upgrading hardware at the same time. That's pretty cool. And a hybrid, which basically means the same thing. Hybrid basically means I set up 2 machines side by side, but the second one has got the exact same name and the same IP address. So I set them up side by side, and then when I'm happy, I just take this one down, put this one in its place, and turn everything's back up and running again. So I'm not 2 separate servers operating simultaneously. 2 separate servers, but not simultaneously. They can't be on the network at the same time because they have the exact same name and the exact same IP address. Okay, so that's how hybrid works. Okay, the speed to accomplish this. Migration is obviously slower, right? But, if you're not in a time crunch, that's probably the way to go. Risk. Which one is the most risky? Well, the answer to that question is not the risk. Which one is going to take the most effort for a fallback? If something happened, what would it take? Well, in a migration, there's nothing to go back to because you haven't got anything. You got a brand new server out of a cardboard box. So, it's not like, well, you need to do a backup first. Backup of what? I don't have anything. But in place, I'm going to have to do a backup, and then I'm going to, the risk associated with this roughly the same. Well, maybe not. I guess in place it has more risk. But it's really about that fallback plan. How fast can I make that happen? So which is easier to do fallback? Okay. If it's a migration, I just shut the server down and say, well, screw it, we'll try next week. Right? The new server, right? No big deal, right? Disruption. So the goal, of course, is to have the least amount of user disruption. That kind of makes sense. And the effort. Perhaps there's no training required, maybe. Perhaps there's no changing of the DNS or DHCP value or anything like that, and so you could do it the same. Otherwise, you may have to have other people involved. Now, let's say you have a system administrator who's installed the DNS server 5 years ago, and we don't really maintain it very much, and so it's no big deal, but I want to do this migration thing with 2 machine names. And he's going to say, I've never really done that before. I've never had 2 machines with the same name and say the same IP address at the same time. I'm not sure how that works. Well, now would be the time to find out. Do a little bit of training beforehand. Okay. Step number 5 is writing the plan. Oh, having a dry run would be really, really nice. A test environment where you could try this out. I know that's not reality in a lot of cases, but it would be kind of cool. That's what I do in this class. When I do these demos, particularly the hands-on, you think that's the first time I've ever done that? Really? Or do I try it out first and make sure it works, and then go erase everything so when I do it, it's well rehearsed, and so there's hardly any mistakes? Although I make lots of mistakes, don't I? Okay. So in this plan, do I have any new services? Making 2 changes versus making 1 change. I really, really do not want to make multiple changes. Here's the scenario. Let's say your car won't start. And so you go in here and you tweak this, and you tweak that, and then you tweak that, and then it does start. And somebody says, great, what is it that you did? Fixed it. And you go, well, I don't know. I changed 3 things. I have no idea which one of them was the problem. That's what we're talking about. Don't make multiple changes, because when things go wrong, you won't know why. Is it this that caused the problem, or is it that that caused the problem? So small batch, small batch. Okay. Remember to eventually disable the old servers. Just because you've got these things set up like in a migration scenario, your plan ought to include, okay, by next week, we're going to, shut down the old server. Do I keep the old software along with the new? There's some software will allow you to have the old and new software working simultaneously. In other words, I don't know, the example they use is Apache. SQL Server is another example. I can have the old version of SQL Server and the new version of SQL Server running simultaneously on the same hardware. And then after I've migrated, I get rid of the old, but you're going to have to remember to get rid of the old. Now, not all software does that. Not all software allow you to have the old and the new running simultaneously. Okay, so address rehearsal, perhaps an old server someplace where you actually try it out. This will give you a much better time estimate on how long it's going to take to do a restore operation or actually just the install part. You might be guessing how long it takes to do the restore. The install. Well, fine. You grab an old server, plug it in, and whoop out your stopwatch, and you'll know exactly how long it takes. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark.